feel free to unmute yourself and just say hi to the room or put it in the chat for a few minutes here while we're getting set up. Folks are still signing in.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Always good to see you.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Diane,
Paula.
I haven't seen you for so long.
Yeah. Trying to cool off from my hot bike ride.
We had a wind like that on the North Shore last week. Thought I was gonna go backwards.
There was no wind when I left. It just drives me nuts.
Let me go to the second screen here and see who's there. Okay, there's more faces, pictures. And some new names too. I see a few new names joining us. I know today's session, a lot of people are going to catch the replay. I've had several emails because, as you know, I know the ACDA leadership team had a meeting this morning, and MMEA folks have had some meetings, and the Chorus America conference is going on right now. I just left the session. It's the nice thing about these virtual conferences. You can do sessions in your living room and literally be in two places at once. So several folks have asked, is it going to be recorded? And yes, since Ingela is going to be presenting for the first half of our time together, we will record that. And then we will break out into some discussions that she will coordinate and prepare us for, and come back and report out. And Ingela will finish us, she will finish the time together with some summarizing comments there. So let's see, I'm just gonna, because people keep joining, so I'm gonna pick on one person, and someone that I know well enough to pick on you. So Christina Berger, you knew it was coming. Unmute yourself.
I was kind of afraid it was coming, yes.
It's one of those teacher tactics. How are you, Christina? Just, you know, you're still fairly new to the state. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to meet you at Augsburg. But just how are you doing, Christina?
Thank you for asking me, Philip. It's a day-to-day thing for me, I think. You know, it's kind of it's a big whammy. We're so uncertain as choral musicians about what's coming. And then, of course, we live very close to the uprising after the murder of George Floyd, and we're very involved in the goals that the uprising is aiming toward. But we were also living right in the middle of the white terror that came to our cities for several nights in a row. So, you know, I'm up and I'm down. It just kind of depends. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely. No, thank you for sharing and for being, like many of you, being a true ally in the movement, using our art and the work that we do to bring about change. So thank you, Christina. I appreciate you. And,
I appreciate
one more.
You.
Jonah Heine, many of you know Jonah, one of our up-and-coming conductor educators, and Jonah is I don't know if everyone knows his news. So Jonah, I just want to give you an opportunity to let everybody know about some of the changes upcoming for you soon. How are you?
Yeah. Hey, I'm doing well, thanks. I just moved from my place to Northfield up to Sauk Rapids, where my folks reside. If you can't tell, I'm in central Minnesota. There's a deer in the background, which I was trying to figure out the best background situation, but we cannot be apologetic about some of these things. So this is just where I'm at, right? So I'm currently living with my folks for the summer, and I'm moving out to Eugene, Oregon in late July to start my master's in choral conducting at the University of Oregon. So it'll be definitely not what I was expecting it to look and feel like, but it's going to be an amazing experience nonetheless, and I'm really looking forward to just grow as a musician, teacher, and person. And also part of me is a little thankful too to take a step back during these uncertain times and to become a student again, and just to be able to learn and soak up so much. So I'm really looking forward to that, and my time left in Minnesota is just gonna whiz by. It's coming up in about a month and a half.
Got it. Well, we wish
Thanks
you
for
all the
checking in.
best. Of course, and we wish you the best. And know that our paths will cross again and you will come back home. The reason I'm here is because my Minnesota wife brought me here. I'm grateful for that. So Minnesotans tend to come back home. And we're very proud of you and the work you're doing. I had the pleasure of working with Jonah when I was a graduate student, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, can I be an intern in your choir?" And have just always admired his work. So thank you,
I'll miss him
Jonah.
already.
Yeah, right.
Boo!
Oh, thank you for being here, everybody. I know this was kind of a whirlwind when we changed the schedule due to the memorial service for George Floyd. It put us to make a decision. Either we go with a weird, wonky gap, or we just do three back to back. And I thought it was better to do three back to back. After talking to the team a little bit, we're going to record this presentation so folks can't hear it, but it will allow us to, on the other end of the 4th of July, really get into some more conversations that I think many of you want to have with each other. Hopefully you saw the notes, and this time we kind of just sent the unfiltered notes with each of the groups so that you have access to download and edit those from our discussions. They're obviously very early stage conversations that we had, but we knew that the ACDA report would be coming out. Thanks to TESFA and all the 13 committee members for their diligent work and thinking through things. 110 pages worth, right? If you've had a chance to go through it for each area. And so the thought would be to give you time now, and I made all of that available to you, to take a look at all of that so that when we come back together next week, some framework for processing that and living into that a little further as to how it affects us and impacts us here in Minnesota. So I just wanted to give you that foreshadowing what's to come. But today is another session about us and about our singers. We go to school to learn pedagogy. We go to school to learn repertoire. We go to school to learn, all the things about teaching. We spend some time with emotional learning and well-being, but not enough. And so I think it's very important that we share this space today with someone of Ingela's experience and talents. She is a singer, so she understands us. She's a voice teacher, so she has been teaching, I'm sure, in the virtual world like the rest of us have been in some form or fashion. But she also has this great skill set through her work with Courageous Artistry in helping us to deal with anxiety and all the forms that it presents itself. So she's based in New Mexico, and just delighted to give you a Minnesota welcome. So I'm gonna turn the podium over to you and put you on spotlight and let you take it away. Can we greet Ingela?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Philip, for that warm welcome. Philip knows this about me already, but I have a soft spot for the upper Midwest. You may have noticed that my name looks maybe somewhat Scandinavian, and you would be right. I'm of Norwegian heritage, and my parents are both from Fargo-Moorhead area. My aunt went to St. Olaf. I mean, I come from a long line on both sides of folks from the upper Midwest. So I'm glad to be joining you today from sunny Albuquerque, New Mexico. Yeah, as Philip mentioned, I have a lot of plans for us today. I have a lot of information to share with you. I hope that you have a writing utensil and a piece of paper or something to take notes. I also let Philip know that you're free to ask questions. I would just ask you to type them into the box. And I did let him know that when I give these presentations, oftentimes the question that's being asked will be covered at some point in my presentation. So if you wouldn't mind, just as best you can, holding on to some of your questions. If I'm sharing something of value with you, like a link or a name of a specific technique or article, I have tried to include it in my PowerPoint presentation. I also will have all of my contact information for you available at the end of today so that you can contact me with further questions. I'm happy to chat with anybody via email or social media. As Philip mentioned, I am a singer. I lived in Germany for a decade and sang opera professionally there. And I've also been teaching for about a decade now. It's actually my final month of teaching because I've decided to put my teaching to rest for a while to focus on my other business. When I moved back to the United States after being in Europe, I decided to pursue a master's degree in counseling. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of New Mexico, also referred to as a therapist or psychotherapist, whatever people call it in their area of the world. And I've decided to combine my two loves of music and mental health into a business called Courageous Artistry. And I present a lot on topics that pertain to musicians and their mental health. I coach individual clients. I do all sorts of fun and interesting work with this, and I really love it. So I was so pleased when Philip and Tesfa reached out to me. Turns out Tesfa went to graduate school with my husband, who's a professor of voice at the University of New Mexico here. So as you all know, I don't need to tell you, the singing and choral worlds are very, very small. We're probably all just connected by, 1 degree of separation max. So I will go ahead and share my screen with all of you. I have a PowerPoint to present. I'm going to try to take about 30-40 minutes to go through the bulk of my information. So I apologize in advance. I will be going through things rather quickly because Philip and I discussed a lot of points that seem like they could be valuable to you. And then we will go into breakout rooms, and I can join some of the breakout rooms and answer any questions. And then we'll come back and we'll do some group discussion at the end. And I just have a couple more slides to share at the end. But really, our last part of this talk today will be about sharing some of our findings, some of our thoughts, some of our concerns. And I really intend this to just be a jumping off point. I did view the YouTube clip of Carrie Michaels, who also did a lot of talking about musicians and mental health and self-care. I made sure to watch it so that I didn't double up on too much of her information, but I think what we do is different enough that hopefully most things today will give you another view of things. The things that are really important, of course, will always stay the same, and there will be a few things that I will be sure to really underline and highlight during this presentation that I believe are going to be important for all of you as leaders. So it is my understanding, and Philip, you can just give me a thumbs up if this is true, that these are all where I'm talking to all choral directors and educators right now.
Choral and vocal as well, and some singers in the room as well.
Fantastic. Okay, well, this pertains to everybody. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't some group I was leaving out, so that when I give examples, I can try to give the best examples I can to include everyone. Alrighty, let me share my screen here. It always takes me a moment to figure out. Okay, slideshow view going. So this is just to introduce me. All those initials after my name are just my way of saying that I've studied all of this, and I really believe that I can walk the talk, as it were. So much of what I will share with you today is based in research and science from counseling psychology, but I'm going to present it to you in a way that hopefully will help you feel comfortable learning some of these skills, using them not only on yourself and for yourselves, but also with your students, with your fellow singers, with your choristers, with your congregation, with your choir members within a congregation, whatever it may be, or whoever you do come into contact with. Oop. Okay, here we go. All right, so I always like to take a moment at the beginning of these presentations to just have everybody sit for a moment, close your eyes if that feels safe, and take some deep breaths. And as you're doing this, I want you to ask yourself, how am I doing today? How am I feeling? Do I notice anything that comes up for me physically? Emotionally? Can I tune into some of the mental chatter that's going on with me at this moment in time? How am I feeling in my spirit as a musician, which is an important question to ask. And I ask this not only to give us a moment to come to a little bit more rest and a little bit more of a groundedness as we share all of this information today and discuss some difficult things, but also to make us aware of the fact that we exist on so many different levels, and we're going to be affected by so many different things. We're going to be affected by things happening with us physically, things happening with us emotionally, mentally, etc. So just not to judge, not to evaluate, just to notice, how are you doing at this moment in time? Excuse me. How I'm doing is I have a tickle in my throat. So just like I was talking about, I believe that the artist exists on many levels, as does the human, of course, but we have the artistry that happens in our mind, right? The learning, the cognitive skills. We have the learning and the awareness that happens in the body, of course, especially as singers. Our whole instrument is our body, whether we like it or not. Some days we wish we could just throw that instrument right in the corner when we are frustrated with it. But unlike a violinist or a clarinetist, we can't just put it down and walk away from it. We have to carry it around with us at all moments in time. This also, of course, then means that we're also carrying around our emotions with us as artists all of the time. Now, when I talk about spirit, I talk about, if you are a person who is religious, then I'm sure that you can imagine what I mean by this, but I don't think you have to subscribe to organized religion to believe that we are all in this profession because of the passion and the joy that we find in it, because we feel called to do so. And so that's what I refer to as the artist's spirit. And then, of course, amongst all that, we have our artistry, which is sort of a different topic altogether. And that's not one that we're really going to much be touching on today, because we already have, many of us, degrees under our belt where we have spent years and years and years of our time learning about how to be an artist. But today we're really going to talk about how to be an artist from all of the other perspectives, how to take care of ourselves as artists and humans. If any of you have ever taken a psychology class, you may have heard of the psychologist Abraham Maslow. He created this hierarchy of needs. And I know the slide is ever so slightly fuzzy, but at the top of the slide, we have self-actualization, the desire to become the most that one can be, followed by esteem, followed by love and belonging, safety needs, and physiological needs. So what Maslow is saying with this hierarchy of needs is that if our physiological needs are not covered, it's going to be hard to think about our safety. When our safety needs are not covered, it's going to be hard to pursue love and belonging. But of course, for us as artists, especially thinking about the top two tiers of Maslow's hierarchy, the tier of esteem, self-respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, etc., and then self-actualization, which is what I believe that we are all pursuing as artists. The desire to be the best human that we can be, the desire to be the best artist, the best conductor, the best leader, the best singer we can be. So we all have so many tools that we have used and learned over the years to develop our artistry. I mean, I began taking piano lessons when I was 5, and then I studied oboe, and then I went to voice lessons, and then I got a bachelor's and a master's, and I've had private instruction my whole life. I can't tell you how many hours I have put into becoming the best artist I can be. And it was only when I started getting into the mental health field that I realized what a disservice I had done to myself, but also in a way I think that our community as a whole does to us and to people within the community, in that we don't talk enough about how to cope and develop tools for how we feel about our artistry, how we feel about ourselves, what types of strategies we use, what types of tools we have in our toolkit. So we know all the tools to use if our choir is not matching vowels, right? But we may not know the tools to use if we notice a general feeling of sadness or grief within our group, or when we don't know ourselves how we can stand up and be a leader for people. And I know that especially you as a community have gone through some really difficult times, as we talked about at the beginning of the meeting a little bit with Christina and Philip. So, how we are doing and how we are coping with what is going on, thinking back to that hierarchy of needs of Maslow, it makes such an important difference if we can really make a commitment to learning more tools to work on how we feel about our artistry and ourselves as artists, within ourselves, within our choral communities, within our greater musical community, within the community of our city, town, state, etc. We also have a lot of expectations of ourselves. And I know in some of the groups that I've talked with recently, people are really struggling with how to transition to technology only. How do we make music as a group when we are doing it all online? People are experiencing a lot of doubt, a lot of fear as leaders of big groups, a lot of insecurities, and I do want to touch on that later in this presentation, just not only to normalize that and say, of course we would feel this way. Of course you would feel worried about how you are going to create the same type of atmosphere online as you know how to do in person, perhaps with a group of people who are also going through their whole own individual group of struggles due to the current climate and circumstances. So we have a lot of expectations of ourselves, which I believe, motivate us and help propel us forwards, but they also can sometimes leave us feeling like we are frequently less than, or not doing good enough, not doing our job well enough. So one of the things that I think was talked about before in this group a few weeks ago is the importance of self-care. And I can't remember who I took this from, but I took the phrase extreme self-care from another person in the field, because it's not enough to know how to take care of ourselves. We have to be doing it. We cannot just say, oh yeah, self-care, that means I should take a nap and I should make sure to eat my veggies and stuff like that. No, really, we have to think about how can we take care of others in the way that we want to or hope to if we are not taking care of ourselves. If our cup is empty, there's very little that we can give. So I really want to urge you all to think about this as we continue today. So let's start with the body. Let's start with what happens when we are in a fearful or anxious state in the body. This is the so-called fight, flight, or freeze response that I'm sure all of you have heard of before. And I think what's important to note about this is that this is one of the most natural processes that can happen within a human or any animal in the animal kingdom. If we sense a threat in our environment, whether I am a lion and it's another larger alpha lion coming my way, or a hunter, or whether I'm a human being and the threat in my environment is the loss of the esteem of my choristers if I don't know how to run a virtual choir rehearsal. These are all threats in our environment. They are threats to our well-being. Whether our life is actually at stake or not, we do perceive these as threats, and so does our system. And then our system is very clever. It wants to keep us alive. So what does it do? It goes into fight, flight, or freeze response. And I'm sure that all of us can recognize this and can recognize this within ourselves right now, just how we notice our hearts beating faster at certain moments. Our breath is short. Perhaps we're having trouble focusing. So what's happening here is the certain part of our nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, is becoming very, very activated. And it is flooding our system with all sorts of stress hormones and chemicals that prepare us to fight or to run or to play dead, as it were. And we can't just tell our bodies to stop with our minds. We can't just say, hey, self, it's okay, just calm down. I mean, when you run into somebody who's really aggravated or angry or really activated in their emotions, how well does it honestly work to tell that person, hey, just chill out? Just calm down, right? That never works. In fact, usually it aggravates the person even more. So it's the same with ourselves. If we just tell our bodies to calm down, that's not going to work. We are going to need tools that we can employ to do so. So what we're trying to do when we do this is we are trying to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic, once again, is responsible for fight, flight, or freeze. And parasympathetic is responsible for what we call rest and digest. So we're going to look at some strategies now. I'm going to go over these strategies pretty quickly because, like I said, I do have a lot of information to share with you today. All of these things are easily Googleable. Googleable, that's such a fun word to say. But we can activate the parasympathetic nervous response, which once again is the one responsible for rest and digest, through taking sleep really seriously, our nutrition, making sure that we get exercise. However, I will say, for those of you who are very frequent exercisers or very advanced exercisers who devote a lot of time to exercise and perhaps high intensity exercise, when our system is in fight or flight, even if it's just sort of, level 3 on a level of 10, sometimes very intense exercise can activate the sympathetic nervous system anymore, or even more. So that's one of my little caveats. Be careful when you are feeling anxious, when you are feeling fearful, when you are feeling highly stressed out, just how much hard exercise you engage with, because there's always a chance that it could overstimulate the sympathetic nervous system. Breath work. I know that the box breath was mentioned in here a few weeks ago, but there's also, besides the box breath, I do a simple one that I call the snake breath. So it's take a simple inhale and then hiss it out on an exhale. So anything that we do to lengthen an exhale, frequently in mini breath exercises, there is a longer exhale than there is inhale. That long exhale actually activates the parasympathetic system and gets us into a more rested, more relaxed state. So it's the same principle when everybody feels very nervous before they go on stage to sing, and then they sing through the first few phrases and everybody tends to feel better. That actually has a lot to do with the parasympathetic response, because as singers, of course, we take short breaths and then we sing long phrases on our exhalatory gesture, right? Another way to activate our parasympathetic response is through mindfulness strategies or meditation strategies. I have some that if you ask me later, I can recommend to you, but really, like I said, if you just Google these things, probably the most useful and helpful and most common ones will come up at the very top of the list, and it'll likely be a process of just experimenting with your own selves to see what works for me. But there are apps, there are programs, there are CDs to listen to. And then, of course, an activity like yoga or stretching, which really deepens the breath and once again gets our parasympathetic system more online, as it were. So these are some of the ways in which we can take much better care of our bodies that I would really implore you to think about adding to your routine if you don't have those in there already. It doesn't have to be huge amounts of time, and I know the excuse I often get from my counseling clients is, but I'm so busy. But if we think about how much time we honestly waste during the day on, for example, a device, or I don't know, engaging in something that's maybe not benefiting us, we certainly can find time to do 5 or 10 minutes of a breath activity or 5 or 10 minutes of a meditation activity. All right, taking care of the mind. When we learn to tune into the level of our thoughts, also referred to as cognitions, we can begin to separate the life of the mind out from ourselves, right? We are not our minds. However, I would say that at this point in time and in our specific Western world and culture, we very much all identify with the world of the mind, with the world of the thoughts. Our society places a lot of value on the world of the thoughts and the intellect. And so we sometimes harbor the untruth, the lie that our thoughts are facts. We believe that because we think a thing, it is true. And if we're going around thinking really helpful, supportive, kind, wonderful, positive things, great, we might be benefiting from that. But if we're engaging in very negative self-talk and or a lot of limiting beliefs, we are likely going to have a very negative or difficult emotional response to those types of limiting beliefs and self-talk. We're going to get more into this later on when we go into our breakout rooms. But right now, I just want to point out 2 strategies. If you are a person for whom this is completely new material right now, I would really suggest beginning to journal, or perhaps talking to a mental health professional or to a trusted person in your life, a pastor, a priest, a trusted friend. And by talking about the life of the mind and what our thoughts are doing, oftentimes we can then more closely learn to observe what's going on there with the goal to address things that aren't working for us. So we're going to get a little bit more into limiting beliefs and self-talk later and do some exercises around that. I know that I wanted to bring this up today because, like I said, in the communities that I'm a part of, online and in person and in the music world and in other talks that I've given like this, a lot of people are really suffering due to their thoughts right now, their thoughts about themselves, their thoughts about their community, their thoughts about their ability to lead their choir, for example, or not. And this is creating a lot of extra turmoil. You know, we already have enough turmoil out there in the world. Why create more for ourselves with our own minds? But first of all, we have to learn how to recognize this. Taking care of our emotions is not as simple as, just telling ourselves not to feel a certain way or guilting or shaming ourselves for feeling something. The level of emotions is one that I generally think we cannot affect as directly as we can our physiology or our mind. So we can affect our mind pretty directly once we start looking at the patterns of our own minds. And we can also affect our physiology positively quite quickly if we begin getting more rest, taking better care of ourselves, doing a breathing activity for a few minutes when we're feeling aggravated or stressed out. The emotions are a little bit more complicated. So what I like to point out with our emotional world is having social connection. And look, we can give ourselves an A plus because right now we are connecting socially, right? We are in these virtual rooms, and although we're sitting alone in our own houses or apartments, we are sharing something together, and we're going to go into these breakout rooms. So y'all are already excelling at this, and I think that most musicians are pretty good at this because we make music with other people, and so we get that social connection, which of course right now having to face the world of virtual music making seems a little bit different, but even online or telephone connection is better than none. Developing compassion for ourselves, for the emotional experiences that we're having at any given point in time. Let's say that as I asked you at the beginning of this presentation, how are you doing today? Perhaps feelings of sadness or grief or frustration or anger were coming up. That's okay. If we have compassion for ourselves, we tell ourselves, that's all right to feel that way. Everybody feels that way sometimes. If we're demonstrating compassion for others, we would never say, oh, you don't feel that way, don't feel sad. If we were being caring, understanding, empathetic people, which I know all of you are, we would say something along the lines of, yeah, that's hard. That happens sometimes. I feel sad about that too sometimes. Or I'm so sorry that you're feeling so badly. So that compassion that we're often so good at extending to to others, we need to learn how to extend to ourselves. A part of that is even learning how to identify our emotions. There's so many times where I'm sitting in session with a client and I ask them to tell me how they're feeling. And I say, I want you to use emotions words. Tell me, how do you feel right now? More often than not, unless that client has been seeing me for a while and we've practiced this, they tell me how they're feeling in thoughts. They say, well, I feel like my dad is being such a jerk today. Hold up, that's not an emotion. That's a thought. But we use this I feel, and then we start inserting thoughts after it, as opposed to really tuning into what's happening with us on an emotional level. I feel sad today. I feel happy. I feel curious about what we're going to learn in this presentation. For me, if I'm speaking from my perspective, even sitting in my own home, in my own office that I sit in every day in front of a computer, I feel nervous because I saw all your faces as you were coming into the room. So if I'm just being sympathetic to my own state and aware and compassionate of my own state, I can say, okay, Ingela, so you feel nervous? You feel excited, you feel happy to be meeting new people, you feel all of these things at once. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But only when I can recognize it and learn to name it can I begin to learn how to accept it. Another part of learning how to deal with our emotions in a healthy way is learning how to communicate not only to ourselves and with our loved ones, but then also with our groups of people that we serve. And we're going to get more into supportive and empathetic communication strategies a little bit later on in this presentation. So, oh, actually, we're going to get into it right now. I forgot that that was the next slide. So if we're talking about supportive communication, and I will give you a little side note right now, I did write an article on mental health in the teaching studio, specifically in the voice studio. And the link for that article, it's available online. It was in Voice Prints, which is the web address is at the bottom of this slide. So if you want to write that down and learn a little bit more about it, but I revisited that article today. It just came out, I think, in March or April. And I wanted to highlight for you some of the strategies that I wrote about for private voice teachers, which I'm sure some of you also are. So when Philip and I were sort of talking about and designing this presentation, one of the things that came up was the ability to communicate with our groups, whatever our groups may be, in different ways. Because the old ways that we've been communicating, maybe they were fine. Maybe you're already doing some of these things that I'm going to talk about today. But living through such incredibly difficult times, I do believe calls for higher standards of emotional and empathetic communication. So I just wanted to bring up a few of these things today that anybody can do. This is not just relegated to counselors or therapists. And I'm sure that you'll see things that you're already doing really well, and hopefully you'll learn a thing or two to add to this. So first and foremost, I was trying to put myself in some of your shoes as I was designing this presentation, and I'm thinking, all right, let's say I'm thinking of a choral conductor right now who's faced with going back to either online or in-person instruction here soon in the fall, whether it's in a school or a church or a community group. Maybe you're having to face these questions of, do I do hybrid? Do I do all online? What does the CDC say? What does the ACDA say? What does NAT say? What do they all say? Knowing full well that we're all in a tricky position right now. And knowing also full well, as I'm sure all of you are most likely already experiencing, that the people around us, or the people that we serve as leaders, are also feeling incredibly raw, incredibly lost, dealing with things on a higher level than many of them have ever dealt with before, feeling very what we might refer to as emotionally activated, perhaps very distressed, very anxious, of course, very fearful, angry perhaps, sad, grieving. And this is going to, of course, bleed over into our communities and into our interactions within these communities. So first and foremost, learning to be an empathetic communicator. Empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. I believe deep, deep in my heart that we as musicians are generally, as a group, extremely skilled at this already. That we already use a lot of very empathetic ways of communicating. But really, to say that we're communicating empathetically means that if I talk to one of my choristers, for example, after rehearsal, or they come to me in between rehearsals, or they want to have a phone call or Zoom meeting with me, that I'm paying attention to both my verbal but also my nonverbal behaviors. If we're in person, of course, trying to maintain good eye contact, a calm tone of voice, doing what we call active listening. So we can nod to show that we're understanding. If I am looking directly at the camera right now and I'm pretending I'm talking to somebody, nodding to show I'm with you, I understand. Many of us do this already very naturally, but really paying attention to what are some of my nonverbal cues during communication. Another one would be to show that we are active listening, and many of us already do this, is to do things like use what we call go-ons, like, okay, yeah, tell me more about that. To encourage the person who is talking with us, who perhaps is in some distress, to continue their communication. Of course, a relaxed physical posture also does wonders. If I'm collapsed within myself and I have my hands across my chest, I'm essentially closing myself off to that person. Perhaps I also feel somewhat threatened in the moment. So if we have any type of closed off, closed in body posture where we're turning away from somebody or we're crossing our arms in front of our chests, that is oftentimes within the animal kingdom a sign that we are feeling attacked or threatened, because we are literally protecting our internal organs from attack. So something to pay attention to when we give this posture. Maybe it's just habit now. We are giving a sign to our partner in conversation that we're not fully with them. So being aware of what our arms are doing and having a relaxed and open posture. Making reflective statements. I think very oftentimes people in positions of leadership often feel like they have to fix things for people, and they end up taking on a lot more than they can handle or know how to handle. But oftentimes just a simple statement of reflection, such as, I gave you a couple examples here, Jane, I've noticed that you seem really sad lately. Or, Joe, I notice in rehearsal that you're oftentimes staring off into space, and I'm just wondering if you want to talk about anything or if something's going on with you. The great thing about making reflective statements is that you can just trust your own gut. And if you venture to say to somebody, you seem sad, if that person is not sad, they'll say, no, I'm not really sad, but I am. And that opens the door to further communication. So oftentimes I think people are afraid to venture a guess. It's like we're afraid to trust our own instinct, and we might be off. But 9 times out of 10 in my experience as a therapist, if I say to somebody, you're really angry right now, in a very non-judgmental way, that person feels heard, they feel seen, they feel understood, and we don't have to do anything to quote unquote fix that for them. We're just holding up a mirror and saying, I see you, and I see how you're doing. Is it like this? And they can say yes, no, or maybe, but frequently, even if we were wrong about our hunch, that helps the person who we're speaking with further define how they are feeling. So sometimes I'll say to a client, you seem really upset today. And they'll say, no, I'm not upset, but I'm just really angry. And then at least that person has gotten that much closer to what's actually going on with them. Using normalizing statements can be incredibly powerful, because we all tend to think that we're the only ones experiencing any given thing in any given moment. Oh, everybody else is doing fine and I'm over here suffering, which, of course we know that that's not true. But to be able to say to a student or a chorister, if we're having a talk with them, that a lot of people are going through this. Or you might also use a normalizing statement and say, I also am going through this right now. It's difficult for me too. To let them know that they're not alone in how they feel, that all feelings, all emotions are a very human experience. It's like a rainbow, and we experience all the colors. There's no way to get rid of any of the colors of the rainbow. They're all there. We're all going to experience them at some time or another. Now, some pitfalls of supportive communication that we really want to watch out for, because these are things that break down communication. If we are in the habit of telling people that they should or shouldn't feel a certain way, I think our intentions are often good in that moment. Oh, don't feel that way. Oh, you shouldn't feel sad because X, Y, and Z. Look on the bright side. But at its heart, that's a very dismissive way of treating someone. So we don't have to fix it for them. But if we tell somebody they should or should not be feeling a certain way, oftentimes that will break down communication and build walls. And if we're trying to connect and build bridges, then that can be very damaging. Another thing that I would urge you all to do is that if you are feeling that uh-oh feeling about anybody you know or anybody that you make music with, if you're ignoring these warning signals that your gut is giving you about that person's mental health or well-being, I always think, and I've been trained, I'd rather lose them as a friend. I'd rather risk angering them if I say, hey, you don't seem like you're doing well and I'm very concerned about you, than have something terrible happen to them. And I will go into, of course, a couple very triggering conversations right now. For example, suicide. I would rather have somebody hate me till kingdom come than ignore my gut when it's speaking to me about somebody's well-being or lack thereof. And worst case scenario, you anger somebody, but I think in the end, it's our job, if our gut is speaking to us in these ways, and with all the ways that society and education and music are changing right now, there are going to be much higher rates of mental health disorders. I think it also behooves all of us to be aware of mental health resources within our communities. And I prepared a slide for you at the end of our talk today with some mental health resources within your own community. So to always have those on hand for people and to let them know that it's okay to reach out for help. This is how we can also normalize struggling. We can say, it's all right to reach out for help if you're sad. I've reached out for help before. I tell my clients, my psychotherapy clients all the time, that I do my own psychotherapy. I'm not immune to this. I don't have it all figured out. We all need help. We all need support. So the less stigma we can have around reaching out for help, or the less stigma we can have around accessing mental health services, the healthier and happier we can all be, and the healthier and happier our communities can be. Taking care of the spirit. Actually, I'm going to go back because I really like that picture a lot. I think it's so neat. So I just want to give everybody a chance to look at that picture for a moment. This is what I refer to once again when I talk about our calling, our desire, our joy, our passion to be musicians, the reason why we stick this out year after year. I always tell people it wasn't until age 33 that I developed my plan B in life. My plan A was always just music, 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 music. I would have sacrificed and did sacrifice many things for it. So that calling we all have. And within that calling and that passion that we have for what we do, back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we have that piece of self-actualization, being the best me that I can possibly be, along with fostering and tending to our growth and development, which then, of course, involves our goals and our desires and our wishes. And we're going to turn this into an exercise in a moment that is going to go into the breakout rooms. So before we go into the next slide, what I would like to say, and I am keeping an eye on the time here, maybe just take a moment. And as we think about ourselves and where we're at right now at this moment in time, I would encourage you to take a moment and to just write down some of your goals and some of your wishes for the day, for the month, for your year, and just think, what does my heart truly desire at this moment in time? Don't listen to the little voices. These are the limiting beliefs that pop up that tell us, well, but how are you going to do that? Well, that's not realistic and that's not going to happen. But if I had a magic wand to wave and I could make anything happen for myself or for my community, for my musical community, for my group right now, what would that be? Or just, very simply, what are my own personal goals and wishes at this point in time? So I'd really encourage you all to write down a few of these, because we're going to go into a little formula in a moment to help us strengthen our ability to achieve some of our goals. So this formula is called WHOOP, and I have highlighted the letters in the acronym and also put a link for you at the bottom of this slide. This is taken from psychology research, and the official term for it is mental contrasting with implementation intention. So forget I said that. It's just a fancy way of saying that if we are able to follow this little formula that a few researchers have created and used in a lot of different areas of research, that maybe we can get a few steps closer to achieving our goals. So what we want to do in step number 1, the W of the WHOOP formula, W-O-O-P, is defining our wish. What is our wish? That might be another way of saying what is our goal, but sometimes goals and wishes are a little bit different. Then what we really want to go into, and I would suggest that you maybe write this down on your paper so that you could bring it into your breakout room if you need it, is we're going to, after we focus in on our wish, we're going to focus in on what is the desired outcome of that wish. So I'll use myself as an example. So there's what I'm wanting to do is underline the difference between a wish and an outcome. So my wish for this next period of time, let's say up until the end of 2020, my personal wish is to do a lot more presenting and working with musicians, and to, spread my reach. And the outcome of that wish, if I'm thinking about, what would be the outcome of that thing I'm wishing for? The outcome would be that I could feel like I have a sense of purpose. I could feel like I have some great meaning in my life that I can hold on to right now. While my other, I had a bunch of solo gigs lined up with orchestras for the fall, and that won't be happening, but I can, think of my musical wishes as well at some point. But for now, if I'm thinking about this career, my wish is to present and talk to people more. The outcome of that would be that I would feel like I've touched a lot of lives and helped a lot of people. I would be able to give back to my community. So that's the desired outcome. Then what we want to do, and here is where the fancier part comes in, is we want to address possible obstacles to my goal. So if I'm once again going back to my own example, one obstacle to my goal of presenting to a lot of people is maybe not enough people know about me. Okay, that could be one possible obstacle. Another possible obstacle could be perhaps organizations cannot afford to hire me. Another possible obstacle is perhaps I don't have enough time in my everyday life to fit in more presentations. So when I have addressed these obstacles, I can then go about creating a plan to address how I'm going to manage those obstacles if and when they come up. And so far from just focusing on the negative, when we're addressing obstacles, we're not just focusing in on the obstacles and letting those obstacles derail our goals and our wishes. And I think that's oftentimes where we get stuck. We have a wish, and then our brain comes up with all of this drama around, oh, well, you can't do that because, and that's not going to be possible because, well, how are you going to do that? Well, when? Well, you're too tired. You have too many family obligations. And we can always come up with a million reasons to stop or to feel discouraged within our goals and our wishes. But if we create a plan to deal with those, then if and when they do come up, we can say, aha, I know what to do at this point. And the researchers who have used this mental contrasting with implementation intentions within different areas of research have had greatly improved outcomes. And there's more on that website. So I want you to really think about this WHOOP plan. On the whoopmylife.org website, they have a cool packet that you can download and use yourself. It could be something that I could imagine being adapted to be used with members of your group, whoever you work with, or your family, or your partner, or whoever it may be. I think it's a really cool and exciting way to look at things, and it provides a lot of clarity. So now, in a moment, we're going to go into our breakout rooms and maybe spend, I don't know, about 20 minutes there or so. And we're also going to pay attention to some limiting beliefs. So I'm just going to touch on this quickly, and I'm going to leave a couple of these slides up for people to refer back to. When we have goals or wishes or dreams, oftentimes the obstacles that stand in our way are our own limiting beliefs. We can also think of this as our negative self-talk, or sometimes it's referred to as distorted ways of thinking. So our own limiting beliefs oftentimes appear in our brain. And once again, remember, I told you before, thoughts are not facts. I'll say that again 10 times. Thoughts are not facts, but they'll often trick us into thinking that they are facts, that they are real, because we think a thing, it must be true. So a type of limiting belief or thought might be if we are starting to use words like always or never. Oh, that'll never happen for me because of X, Y, Z. Oh, I always mess that thing up, or, so-and-so will never allow me to do that, or everyone, or no one. We use big, big generalizations in those types of thoughts. We engage in all or nothing thinking. Oh, well, if I don't lead a perfect virtual choir, then I'm terrible, right? And these thoughts don't always appear just like ding little thought bubbles for us. Oftentimes they're sort of lurking in the back, and they can take some time to examine and kind of figure out what's actually going on here. Another type of limiting belief or thought pattern is when we're only focusing on the negative aspects. So sort of like when we were talking about goal setting with the WHOOP formula, we do want to address obstacles. But if we spend our time only focusing on those obstacles, we're going to lose the drive and the motivation that the wish and the outcome can provide for us. So we need to make sure that we're not only focusing on the negative aspects of whatever it is that's happening in the moment. When we engage in mind reading or making assumptions, when we act as if we know what someone else is thinking or what they are going to do, we just end up harming ourselves in the end. When we engage in what we call negative predictions or fortune telling, pretending as if we can see the future and we know what's coming. Something I say to a lot of my clients at this point in time when they say, well, everything just feels so unsure now and I don't know what's coming next and it all feels so scary. I get it, that's real. But P.S., even prior to COVID, for example, we never knew what was coming. We just pretended that we did. We thought we did, and we attached to that projection of a future reality so that we provide ourselves with safety and comfort so that we can continue. It's such a human thing to do, but really, at the end of the day, we don't know what's coming tomorrow. All we have is today, and if we can focus on today, maybe we can make some amazing things happen for ourselves. Another type of limiting thought or belief is when we start doing the shoulds or the shouldn'ts or the musts or the have-tos. Oh, I shouldn't be so stressed out about this, or I should know this technology better. Those are just incredibly self-blaming statements. They are setting an imaginary bar very high, and that rarely works. So what we're going to do now is look at how to challenge these limiting beliefs. I don't know if it's possible for me to leave this slide up as we go into breakout rooms. Probably not, huh, Philip? Yeah. Well, some of the questions, and I can pop into some of the rooms and help you all with this, but when we are experiencing limiting beliefs, some of the questions we can use to poke at those limiting beliefs are these. So, oh yeah, good call. Christina just took her phone and she made a photo of this screen. So if you have your phones nearby, you might want to take a picture of this. I will leave it up. And, you know, these can be great ways of addressing limiting beliefs and changing them into something else. So I'll leave that up for just another moment. But I believe the next slide that I have in this presentation, let me just check real quick. Yep, is the pause for breakouts. So I'm going to leave this slide up as we go up into our breakout room, so whoever hasn't taken a picture of it can do so right now. And then, Philip, I'll let you take it from here.
Great, and I think my sound is back on now. So I've got the rooms. I've just put us in 4 rooms, which puts about 6 or 7 people in each room. And right now you're assigned a room for Ingela, and what we can do is I can move you around every few minutes if you'd like.
Sure.
Every 5 minutes or so, and then you can visit all the rooms. Great. So has everyone...
Can I just say one thing before we
Sure.
Continue, which is what I would like you to address in these rooms, folks, is anything that came up. If you want to focus on some of the limiting beliefs that you are all experiencing surrounding your art and music right now, great. Perhaps you can help one another change those limiting beliefs into more supportive and helpful beliefs. If some of you want to talk about the goal setting formula, WHOOP, wish, desired outcome, possible obstacles, creating a plan, that's also somewhere you could go. I'll just leave it up to you, and I'd say, you know, the sky's the limit. Whatever you feel called to work on right now or discuss with your colleagues it's all fair game.
Great. So I'm going to open the rooms now, and we'll send a message when it's time to come back, and I'll also pop in one of these rooms too. So we'll see you there.